Welcome to this program in the Our Finger Lakes History Series. I am Seneca County historian Walter Gable. The topic of today's program is Valois Castle, which was located on Seneca Lake and for many years was a very popular eating and entertainment place, and previous to that was a very important summer retreat for a family. As the title frame suggests, for many years Valois Castle was considered to be a breath of Paris in the Finger Lakes. More specifically, Valois Castle was located approximately 11 miles north of Watkins Glen on the east shore of Seneca Lake. It was an imposing 22-room, 2.5-story mansion built in 1899 as the summer residence of Count Arthur Valois, which becomes Americanized as Valois. Many notable people were entertained within its portals. Count Valois spared no expenses in building and furnishing the dwelling. When Edwin L. M. Holt wrote a personal history of Valois Castle, he referred to it as a breath of Paris in the Finger Lakes. In 1899, the place was built by Arthur E. Valois for his summer home. His mansion was filled with many furnishings brought from Paris, including many Empress Eugenie and Louis XIV pieces. In 1903, the hamlet of North Hector renamed itself as Valois in his honor. On April 13, 1915, Arthur E. Valois died. The same year, the Holt family purchased the property. In 1925, the place was opened as an exclusive hotel and restaurant. In 1926, President Coolidge decided not to accept an invitation to spend his summer vacation there. Tragically, on May 21, 1932, fire destroyed Valois Farm's castle home. Now, who was this Arthur E. Valois, or who built this summer home? He was born in Valois, Canada, as a direct descendant of the Valois dynasty that ruled France 1328 to 1589. He spent much of his lifetime in Paris as a senior partner in the international law firm Valois Loeb that had offices in Paris, several European cities, and also New York City. Valois held several important positions linking France and the United States. He was a personal friend of President William McKinley. He was an avid bass fisherman, so not surprisingly, he wanted a summer home on Seneca Lake, which had great bass fishing. He handled the estate of Dr. Thomas William Evans, who was a dentist in Paris. Valois was an officer in the French Legion of Honor. His wife was May Etta Briggs, a French woman several years younger than Arthur Valois. Shown in this frame is how Arthur E. Valois was described in an article in the Watkins Glen newspaper in 1902. An unostentatious, unassuming gentleman whom it is a pleasure to meet, frank, affable, and cordial, of broad and liberal views, great natural and acquired intelligence, high legal attainments, and an eloquent and able public speaker. It appears to be quite a flattering characterization. Now to begin to explain how the furnishings of the French royal family ended up in Valois Castle, I need to explain some things first about the dentist, Dr. Thomas Williams Evans. In 1847, Dr. Evans won an award for his gold fillings at Philadelphia's Franklin Institute, and he joined the dental care business of Dr. Cyrus Starr Brewer in Paris. Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte was the nephew of the Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. Charles Louis Napoleon became the first president of France in 1848. In 1852, he was made Emperor of France and took the title of Emperor Napoleon III. Louis Napoleon had very sensitive teeth, and he became very seriously appreciative of the dental services that Handsome Tom Evans, as he called him, provided. When Louis Napoleon became emperor in 1852, the Emperor Napoleon III appointed Dr. Evans as surgeon dentist to the imperial court. At that time in Europe, the various royal families had a saying that went as follows: when the crowned heads of Europe wish to communicate with one another without any responsibility, they send for Dr. Evans to fix their teeth. Dr. Evans became a close personal friend of both Napoleon III and his wife, the Empress Eugenie. Dr. Evans did not charge important clients for fillings. Instead, he grew rich by using their inside information to buy and sell real estate in the fashionable heart of Paris. He did accept gifts, however, and they amounted to a treasure trove. At the time of his death, his estate was worth at least $4 million US dollars, perhaps as much as $12 million. Because Napoleon III's wife, the Empress Eugenie, was part of a noble Spanish family, it is easy to assume that many Frenchmen resented this foreigner as being the wife of the emperor. On September 4th, 1870, news of the French defeat in the Franco-Prussian War reached Paris. The Paris mob wanted to kill that Spanish woman, as if she were the cause of the French defeat in this war. So she goes to Dr. Evans' home, seeking Dr. Evans' help to escape to England. Dr. Evans devised an escape plan. The plan was to have the Empress dressed in his wife's clothes and pose as a sick patient seeking to get to England to receive further medical treatment. Her lady-in-waiting, the Madame Le Breton, would pose as the nurse. Dr. Evans would pose as the patient's brother. Dr. Crane, accompanying them, the real medical doctor, would pose as her doctor. At one point on this treacherous journey, the coach was stopped at the city gates by a guard. Dr. Evans, fortunately, had very carefully placed the Empress in the left rear corner of the coach. He leaned out the window to answer the guard's questions, effectively blocking the guard from being able to get much of any look at the face of the disguised Empress Eugenie. Throughout the rest of the 100-mile journey through the countryside of France, they encountered aspects of the violence of the revolution that would overthrow the Emperor Napoleon III. Dr. Evans bluffed and bribed officials en route. At one point, there was a scene of a policeman picking on a townsman. The Empress Eugenie rose from her carriage seat and loudly declared herself to be the Empress and ordered that policeman to stop. The villagers stared at her. Very smartly, Dr. Evans quickly gestured that she was insane, tapping the side of his head with a forefinger. and the people turned away with a laugh and a shrug. At Deauville, Dr. Evans contracted with the owner of a 60-foot cutter named Gazelle to transport the Empress and her son across the English Channel. After a 100-mile journey in Dr. Evans' coach, the Empress Eugenie and Madame Le Breton sailed secretively on the ship Gazelle from Deauville across the English Channel to England. The Empress and her son Lulu set up residence at Camden House in Chislehurst. The deposed Emperor Louis Napoleon joined them after the signing of the peace treaty ending this Franco-Prussian War in May 1871. Out of gratitude for his making her escape possible, many of the personal furnishings of the royal family were given to Dr. Evans. A little later in this program, you will see how some of those furnishings that made their way to Valois Castle. In this postcard, you see what Valois Castle looked like at the time that the Count Valois was living there. This is a close-up picture of the castle. It was designed as an Italian villa, summer villa. A tall, steel-framed windmill near the lake pumped water from the lake into an elevated reservoir east of the villa. The villa and the grounds were lighted electrically by a generating plant that was made to look like a cottage on the cliff, and it contained a dynamo operated by a 40-horsepower engine. As their summer home, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Valois entertained diplomats, artists, authors, and musicians. It is easy to see why Count Valois decided to buy this property and build a large summer home on the property. Undoubtedly, he had seen this potentially beautiful spot more than once as he sailed up Seneca Lake on his trips from New York City to the spa at Watkins Glen, and also very likely as he was fishing at various spots on Seneca Lake. After all, Valois Castle had a beautiful commanding view of Seneca Lake with beautiful lawns, gardens, and trees. This photo shows what the mansion looked like in 1927, when it was the restaurant and entertainment place known as Valois Farms Castle. Valois Castle was located at a very beautiful spot on Seneca Lake. This gives you some idea. Count Valois loved his boats. When Mr. Valois had to come from Paris to New York City on business and had the time to come to his beloved Valois Castle on Seneca Lake, Mr. Valois would sail his 40-foot yacht to Seneca Lake and then down to Watkins Glen, where he would often take a treatment in the mineral water spa at Glen Springs. It was this water cure and the beauty of the region which largely influenced Valois to buy this summer cottage on Seneca Lake. He purchased the Wire Cottage and Vineyard. Then he purchased more farms so that he would have a large tract of land on which to build what became Valois Castle. Now to look inside. Here you see the main lobby entrance to the mansion when it was Valois Farms Castle opened to the public. This must have been quite an impressive initial sight as people came to the restaurant and hotel. There was a large ballroom. Here you see the marble mantel and the gold mirror in the ballroom. In this photo, you get an idea of the enormous size of the ballroom. Note one of the crystal chandeliers that provided soft light. The chandeliers came from the Tuileries Palace in Paris, thanks to the Empress Eugenie, who gave them to Dr. Evans. In this ballroom hung an oil painting of the Empress Eugenie and her secretary on the shore of France, gazing wistfully across the waters. Here you see some of the royal furnishings that ended up in Valois Castle. Let me explain very briefly how these furnishings ended up in Valois Castle. When Dr. Evans' wife died in Paris in 1897, Dr. Evans brought her back to Philadelphia to be buried in Woodlands Cemetery. Dr. Evans died shortly after that in Philadelphia. Arthur Valois acted as the executor of Dr. Evans' estate. Through his role as executor, Attorney Valois came into possession of some of the finest of Her Majesty's personal belongings. Mr. Valois' home in Paris, as well as his summer home of Valois Castle, were filled with paintings, tapestries, mirrors, and mantelpieces that had previously graced the Tuileries Palace in Paris, all basically the result of Mr. Valois being the executor of Dr. Evans' estate. The dining room was reached by going through a portal from the reception room. The dining room contained a full dining room set from King Louis XVI. In one bedroom at Valois Castle was the royal bed of the Empress Eugenie. The bed was made of rosewood and had ornate wood carvings. You can see that it was massive in size. The bed design won the first prize at the Paris Exposition in 1900. This is an example of some of the other fine furnishings in Valois Castle. Here are two George III chairs and an ancient antique chest that had been transformed into a fine radio cabinet. Much of the 100 acres of the estate was devoted to grapes and a total of 200 fruit trees, apples, pears, peaches, and plums. Here is another view of Seneca Lake from a high point on the estate. As I had indicated earlier, Mr. Valois died April 13, 1915. His much younger widow no longer wanted to stay on the estate. Later in 1915, Joseph Holt bought Valois Castle. Joseph Holt had been a close friend of Mr. Valois. On Memorial Day 1925, Mr. Holt opened Valois Farm Castles to the public as an exclusive restaurant and hotel. The dinner price that Memorial Day was $12.50 per person, quite a high figure for 1925. Similar prices prevailed throughout the 4 years of its operation in an effort to perpetuate its exclusive atmosphere and social status, as one advertisement stated. An advertisement in the Cornell Daily Sun on May 21, 1926, referred to dances every Wednesday and Saturday, private dining rooms with special attention given to private parties and club banquets. I think you can understand how it was catering especially to the upper class families that had students at Cornell. In 1926, the Finger Lakes Association approached Evan Holt with the suggestion that the Finger Lakes Association would provide $50,000 towards necessary improvements to the place in the hopes of luring President Calvin Coolidge to spend his summer vacation there. The improvements were made, but President Coolidge decided instead that he wanted to go to Paul Smith's in the Adirondacks. Here is the advertising for New Year's Eve in 1927. You can see quite an elegant program menu. In this advertisement, you see the effort to lure tourists to the Finger Lakes. The ad appeared in a 1929 Auburn, New York publication. Fine musical entertainment was typical at Valois Castle. It was judged by the castle management that local musical groups would not fully satisfy the sophisticated taste of most of Valois Farm Castle's patrons. Sadly, the exclusive hotel and restaurant operation did not prove to be profitable, and Valois Farms Castle closed after about 4 years of operation. But there is more to the story. This is a picture of the bandstand that Mr. Valois funded for the community. Mr. Valois had learned that the local hamlet of North Hector was struggling to equip and support a band, so he contributed generously to the cause. Thanks to his help, North Hector had its band with many new brass instruments, plus a handsome six-sided band shell at the corner of Lake and Main Streets. For many years, there were regular band concerts, usually on Sunday afternoon, and the band performed for many holidays and special events. The hamlet of North Hector was renamed Valois in his honor in 1903. An editorial in the Watkins Express newspaper said this of the renaming of the hamlet: "The name of Valois is musical. It has a meaning, and one of its definitions is benefactor. It seems that Mr. Valois is a worldwide traveler who recognizes and appreciates the beauty of Seneca Lake with its vine-covered slopes, its nestling villages and natural resources, and wishes to do something to perpetuate the village of his adoption." Tragically, on Saturday afternoon, May 21st, 1932, a disastrous fire destroyed Valois Farms Castle. The damage was estimated by the owner, John Holt, to be approximately $60,000. One newspaper described the burned former castle as a mass of charred, ash-covered embers, fallen stonework, and masonry of the cellar Let me start that over again. It was described as a mass of charred, ash-covered embers, fallen stonework, and masonry of the cellar and chimney silhouetted against the skyline as the only remaining traces of this famous showplace of the Finger Lakes. The Valois Fire Department was 2.5 miles away, but it only had meager firefighting equipment. No other fire departments were summoned to try to put out the fire. Significantly, or largely because of this, it was difficult to access Valois Castle by road because of the several narrow bridges that could not possibly hold heavy firefighting equipment. None of the furnishings from the Empress Eugenie were in the castle when it burned. They had found their way to the homes of private collectors, but that story is still a mystery. Fire may have destroyed Valois Castle, but it remains a fond memory of something truly beautiful. It was a little bit of Paris nestling in the hearts of the Finger Lakes. There still is this road sign on Route 414 denoting the road down to where Valois Castle stood overlooking Seneca Lake. I hope you have enjoyed this story, which is a piece of our Finger Lakes history.